And we're back. Welcome back to module number 2. In this module, we're going to be talking about the perception part of the confidence formula. If you remember from module number 1, we covered some body things, and that was breathing down to the diaphragm, and also doing confident stances, the Superman pose, Wonder Woman pose, putting your hands out back like this, standing in a confident stance. Another shortcut was if you're taking up space, that's a more confident thing. If your body is open, that's a more confident thing. And remember, it doesn't just work on you, it works on the people around you. There is a visceral understanding that someone who's walking like this, very closed off, is nervous and therefore a target. And somebody who is large and in charge, somebody who is taking up space, someone who is owning that area, whatever it is somebody who's not scared. The silverback gorilla. Think about it like that. Studies have shown that muggers look at body language, whether consciously or unconsciously. They know how to pick the people that are less likely to stand up for themselves. In essence, the people that aren't confident. So body is always number 1. It's the easiest thing to do. You have the recording of the breathing technique. And then we added to that with the homework where I said, okay, I'm going to send you the next recording, which was the confidence quickie. I hope you've listened to it so far. And you can add to how well that will work for you by standing in a confident power pose while listening to it. It's 4 minutes long, so it's a little longer than the 2-minute minimum. But for 4 minutes, you can stand that way. This time around, perceptions, quick review. It's body, it's perceptions, it's logical mind, and it's emotional mind. Those are the 4 quadrants that we'll be dealing with. Each one affects each other, but everything has to change down at this emotional mind level. We will be getting a little more in depth on this and another thing called the theory of mind as we go along, but I really just want this to be something that you can use as quickly as possible. Less theory, more use. So when it comes to perceptions, there's 2 ways that I talk about using perceptions. One is, what are you focusing your perceptions on? And 2 is, how are you using those perceptions? So for number 1, in any situation, we can focus on the situation at hand. We can focus on what happens afterwards. We can even focus on what led up to it, although really that doesn't help that often. And what I'm talking about is the bubble. And when it comes to confidence, when it comes to crisis, there's a bubble a lot of times. And the bubble is this: I have something to do that I'm focused on. I'm making pictures, representations about it. It is the problem. Instead of focusing exclusively on the bubble, which is the problem, one of the things that I get people to do in order to be confident is to have them focus beyond the bubble. Because there comes a point when the bubble's done, it just disappears. Whatever that problem is will be done at some point. And what happens afterwards is something we tend to forget when our perceptions are only focused on the bubble. In other words, when you're in the bubble, if that's all you're focusing on, you're not really seeing that there is a life afterwards. And that sounds kind of silly for a grown-up, but remember, the emotional mind is not logical. It runs everything, and we are all little kids in big kid bodies, using big kid words to impress the other little kids in big kid bodies. And therefore, it's important to know, I survived this. Now, for some people, that bubble might be asking someone out on a date, going and approaching a new person that they'd like to go out with. That bubble might be asking for a raise. That bubble might be talking in front of an audience or getting on a radio show or dealing with a salesman who's pushing a little too hard. These are all different ways that people have used the bubble. So when it comes to the bubble, what are you focusing on? Are you focusing on the problem state, the moment in time? Because that's all it is, a moment in time. You do survive afterwards, with few exceptions. Remember, here's part of the problem. The emotional mind doesn't know you survive after. The emotional mind is looking for saber-toothed tigers out there. And it's making your body react as if there are saber-toothed tigers. Your breathing changes. You start focusing on the problem because it's right there in front of you. And by the way, when a saber-toothed tiger is chasing you, you don't worry about what's going to happen afterwards. That's why if a tiger jumps into an office room with you and you're on the 8th floor, you're going to fight, you're going to jump, you're probably not going to contemplate. And you're not going to take out a notebook and start making some plans. Because if you do, you're not going to survive. So with that hardwiring in us, kicked off by anything that's seen as danger, if you focus on the bubble, you're basically telling yourself, saber-tooth tiger, saber-tooth tiger, saber-tooth tiger. So take a moment and think about some of the things that you're not especially confident about. You had some homework to do that was helping you to define where those weaknesses are, where those areas of non-confidence are. Think about one of those things that you say, oh, I couldn't do that. I don't feel confident enough to do that. And hypothetically speaking, if somebody was to do the exact thing that you're worried about, whether it's start a new career, expand your career, change your job, ask someone out, whatever it is, if you could imagine them doing that thing, even if it goes horribly wrong, do they survive? Do they live to fight another day? If they do, then that is not what is called an existential threat. And if it's not existential, as in your very existence can be changed by this, live or die, then fight or flight is not the appropriate response. Therefore, focusing on the bubble won't work. That's thing number one, perceptions, where you're focusing, just as importantly as how you're focusing. There are 3 different ways that you can view any situation that you're in with someone else. It's my way, looking through my eyes. It's their way, looking through their eyes. Or it's the disinterested observer, and that's just someone watching. And if you've ever seen those sitcoms where 2 people will remember a circumstance, and the first person will remember it, they're the hero, the other person is doing all the dumb stuff. The second person will remember it, they're the hero, the first person's doing all the dumb stuff. But then someone who's not really involved that was there will come in the room and say, oh, I remember it. And you'll see both the protagonists were doing dumb stuff, because each one was talking from their perspective, but only the disinterested observer, the person who had no dog in the fight, so to speak, the person who didn't have an emotional need to be right, was able to tell them what actually happened. So looking out through my eyes, literally looking out through my eyes, means imagining a situation in which I see it as if it's happening again through my eyes. That's what most people think memories are. We're always looking out through our eyes, but that's not true. Memories are something that we change over time. It's like a giant game of telephone. Every memory, and this has scientifically been proven, every memory that you access is really the memory of the memory you accessed the last time you accessed it. And each time it changes, shifts a little bit. We can use that to our advantage because no memory is real, so we can start playing with it. In neurolinguistic programming, they call it perceptual positions. And what that means is, there's 3 of them. So first position is looking out through my eyes, seeing the situation. Second position would be stepping into someone else and really seeing it through their eyes, stepping into their moccasins, so to speak. And third position would be the disinterested observer. And the disinterested observer, it's the same as saying a fly on the wall. Just watching a situation, and they have no stakes in it. They don't like you better than the other person or the other person better than you. Now, for what we're dealing with today, I'm really going to be talking about looking out through your own eyes or being the fly on the wall. There's a time to take that other person's viewpoint, but a lot of times if we're not confident, we're not taking their viewpoint inaccurately anyway. So we'll come back to that if we have time in this one, or if not, at some later point. First position, looking out through your eyes. It's how most of us think we're supposed to remember things. And it's great for some things. By the way, they're all great for some things, not as good for others. First position, when you're looking out through your eyes, you feel it. You feel the juice of the situation. Emotionally, you are there. It's as if it's happening again. Whether it's a memory, whether it's something that you're dealing with right now, or whether you're planning something in the future. First position is more emotional, and therefore kind of harder to get into that logic portion, because you will go into fight or flight on a negative thing in first position. So the strength of first position is I'm in my body. I can set strong boundaries. I can see it from my perspective. I get to feel things, which is wonderful in certain situations, but not others. Second position, and that's stepping into someone else, stepping into their moccasins, means literally stepping into someone else. Now, what most people do when I ask them to do it is what I call a dirty second position. And I'll give you an example. In dealing with a couple, although I don't do couples therapy, but in dealing with a couple of friends, I might say to them, hey, step out of yourself, step into your spouse, really understand where they're coming from. Take second position, step into them, walk in their moccasins, where they came from, what they're going through now, what their background is, what their religious, all of that, step into that. And then look at this relationship from that perspective. Get some insight into why they're doing what they're doing and step out of it now. And then I'll ask them, so do you get a better idea of why they do what they do? And if they've done second position right, they'll usually say something along the lines of, yeah, I kind of get it. Now, that doesn't mean they agree with it. There's a difference between agreeing with something and understanding where the person's coming from. When people do a dirty second position, here's how they come out of it. I say, oh, do you now understand better why they do what they do? And they get a smug look on their face and say, yes, they do it because they're an asshole. Now, here's the funny thing. We don't tend to assign negative stuff to ourselves in why we do things. So when someone is doing it at someone else, they're really projecting themselves, their understandings onto the other person. So second position is about letting go of yourself. And the ultimate example I give people that someone in my profession would need to do to step out of themselves totally is, can you imagine the 9/11 hijackers? Can you step into their life, where they came from, what they were doing, their religious beliefs? Can you step in so much that in that moment you understand how they thought that was a good idea, a good thing, to crash into buildings with innocent people? If you can, then you really can do second position. When I do it, I can understand it. Doesn't mean I agree with it. But again, I have to be able to do it really well to work with people. We use all the terms, by the way, step into their moccasins, really be strong in who you are, because we all understand on the unconscious level how we're doing this. Now, here's my favorite position, because this is really one of the things I teach people how to do. And that's third position. That's being a fly on the wall. That literally is watching the situation. And you can watch an interaction between two people, or you can just watch one person go through something. So if you're thinking about something that you're dealing with, you can just step out and watch yourself. It doesn't have to be anything else. Third position, fly on the wall, watches, but doesn't care what's going on. They're not invested. There is no right or wrong. It's dispassionate. And there's ways you can play with that dispassion, make it more dispassionate, get a different perspective by how you change the camera and get where the fly is, so to speak. But what that means, third position, because it's dispassionate, means that you are getting a perspective in which you're not going to go in fight or flight because you're watching someone else go through it. And therefore, you're not in danger. It's a little mind trick you can play with yourself. Now, some cultures, by the way, lean on one or the other. There have been people from certain cultures that I have noticed when I teach them about this fly on the wall technique, it is like a magic trick. They never knew they could imagine something from outside themselves, remember something as if they're viewing it. By the way, in a moment, I'm going to take you through a quick exercise to do that. But intellectually, I want you to understand it first. So being a fly on the wall, perspective. Have you ever heard someone say, hey, you need to step back, get some perspective. You need to rise above it and look down on the whole situation. We're telling ourselves what we need to do. We just didn't know we literally mean to do that. When you are dispassionate, it's great for certain things. It's great for planning complex things without getting overwhelmed. It's great for if there's something in your past that's kind of traumatic that when you remember it doesn't feel that good. Well, a lot of people will ask me, hey, Ken, you're a hypnotist. Take away the memory. I'll never do that. Because if I do that, I'll also take away the learning that you earned through that pain. But I'd rather take away the emotional baggage. And some things are better viewed from a distance. It's great for right now when you're in overwhelm and there's a lot of moving parts to what you're doing. And it's great for where you are contemplating something in the future that is less than pleasant, that you know you'll have to go through or are imagining having to go through. And what I mean by that is literally you're imagining another person that looks like you. You could imagine if they're up on a movie screen, or you could imagine if you pulled the camera out of your own head and were looking at it from a different perspective. Either way is fine. But see the person that looks like you. You actually will use the terminology, and we'll talk about that a little more when we deal with the logical mind. But you'll say them. That's how I'll know someone's doing it correctly. They are this, they are that, and you'll see them looking out in the distance. And by the way, my goal is that you learn to read people, to understand when are they actually remembering something or thinking of something and seeing it through their eyes versus when are they watching it on a movie screen? Because we all do all three of these positions. We're just not consciously aware of it usually. And we all have ones we lean on. Here's the weaknesses of each one. When you're looking out through your eyes, it's easy to get overwhelmed, it's easy to get in fight or flight. When you only step into someone else's shoes, it's easy to become codependent, become a doormat. You become the woman who says, well, he hits me, but I understand why. And never steps back into herself to set the boundary that says, I don't care why, stop hitting me. And when you step out into the third position, fly on the wall, you're very dispassionate. It's a great way to do that. But if you are looking at your relationships through that lens, not a lot of fun going on there. In fact, you could be one of those dispassionate people, Spock-like, if you're a Star Trek fan, very illogical, that can say, well, you know, they broke up yesterday, but he'll be okay, instead of really feeling the emotion. So my goal is you learn how to navigate all three of these different perceptual positions as needed, when needed, always stepping back into yourself at the end. So I'm going to take you through a quick little exercise. If you are driving and listening to this, do not do this or pull over, because we don't want you closing your eyes when driving. By the way, that's going to be true for everything we do here. And all you need to do in order to do this exercise is just close your eyes for a moment. Take a nice deep breath in, let it out, let your shoulders relax. And with your shoulders relaxed, I want you to picture or imagine this. If there is a situation in which you generally don't feel confident, in which you maybe put on your homework, that's one of my weak points. Imagine if you had to go through that situation. If I literally said a minute from now, you're going through that situation, and I could set the whole thing up, and imagine what it would look like through your eyes to see it. You may imagine that to the point where you start to feel a little nervous. But if you were to imagine watching someone who looked just like you go through that experience, you might notice that you don't feel it as much. And if you were to imagine really pulling the camera back, flying away from the situation 50 feet away, still seeing them all the way over there, still hearing it all the way over there, but see them go through that situation where they didn't have confidence. You can see them not even be confident. You can see them mess the whole thing up. But if you stay far away like that, what you'll notice is it doesn't seem to touch you as much, because it's no longer you. Your mind no longer takes it as immediate danger. It's contemplative. Now, with that same thing, you could think of something that you're proud of. In fact, think of something you're proud of that you've done in the last year. Think about it and notice if you were to make a mental representation of that moment that you're most proud of. Are you seeing it again as if you're looking through your own eyes, or are you seeing it as if it's a movie of someone who looks like you doing that thing, getting that award, whatever it is? Hold that for a second. And now think of something that you're ashamed of, not happy about, something you did wrong, something that came up as soon as I said it. And notice when you make a representation of that, are you seeing it through your eyes, or are you watching it in a movie? It's a funny thing. And now pass that and let it go and open your eyes. Most Americans tend to do this. I don't know if it's the puritanical work ethic, whatever it was we were taught as kids, but most Americans tend to do this. When I ask them to imagine something that they're really proud of, you'll see them kind of look off, almost like they're watching. And they'll say, yeah, I was watching it. I was watching myself get that. I was watching that person do that. And when I say the thing you're most ashamed of, they'll go like this. And when you ask them, they'll say, generally, I was seeing it through my eyes as if it was going on again. So in other words, they're beating themselves up, because a lot of us got this message that says if you beat yourself up enough, if you rehearse failure enough, then you'll do well. Then you won't make that mistake again. Then you won't be a bad person and do that again. And I'm here to tell you, after 24 years of doing this, that doesn't work very well. People who have a healthier self-image tend to do this when they think of something that they did that was really a screw up in their eyes, something they feel bad about. They observe it. They see the mistake that that person made that looks like them. They get it. They don't want to do that again, because you can watch somebody mess up and say to yourself, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to do what they did. When they're thinking of something they feel good about, they automatically step into themselves and they see it through their eyes as if they're experiencing that accomplishment. Now, remember, you can do this in the past, right now, or the future. It applies to anything. But I want to ask you this. In your life, there's been a moment that you felt good, whether it was confidence, whether it was excitement, whether it was pride, whatever it was. There's a moment you felt good. You may want to remember it as if you are there again, seeing it through your eyes. There are things that you feel bad about that either you've done or have happened to you in the past. Things going on right now that might be overwhelming. Things that you're going to have to do in the future that may not be pleasant. That's the time to step out and watch. If you do that, if you remember that one shortcut, if it feels good, step in and feel it. And if it feels bad, step out and watch that person go through it. Then you've really gotten the mastery of perhaps the most important perceptual lesson you can possibly get. So this was kind of a more complex thing than just breathing and doing stuff. This perceptual position, anyone who's worked with me before knows that you will see that, you'll hear that from me quite often.
Yeah, I'd like to interject something if I can, Ken.
Sure.
I'm listening to you and I am reliving something that just happened 2 days ago.
Perfect.
It's like, I can't go into a lot of detail here, but I mean, maybe privately I can, but I was triggered by something somebody had asked me to do.
Mm-hmm.
And they were triggered because of something that I did that I didn't know. But I spent all of Sunday night just really pissed off kind of mode. And I was definitely in that moment, but I knew I was not seeing it except through tunnel vision. I wasn't seeing any other perspective, and I knew I needed to see another perspective. So I called my mentor and I talked to her. She totally took it in a direction I was hoping that it would go in, just another way to look at it, if you will. And now it's fine, but it was, 24 hours of just turmoil, not seeing just this total tunnel vision of that one particular issue. It was surreal. It was like, I'm listening to you. I'm like, wow, he was there.
Seeing it as if it was happening. That's tunnel vision. You were seeing it again and again and again. So you're getting hit with it again and again and again. And when you talk to anyone, their advantage is they're not you.
Yeah. Disinterested third party.
And that third party is able, that's half the secret of counseling. That's half the secret of helping anyone. Why is it that you know all your friends' screw ups? You got all the answers. You can see what they're doing wrong. Yet when you tell them, they continue to do it. Why? Because they're in their body seeing it. They have a lot of self-dialogue going on at the moment. You're the disinterested observer. Actually, sometimes I'll talk to you guys and then I'll remember, I should say that when I'm actually doing the recording. That's probably one of the things I will do that too. But when you get good at this, by the way, and you get the terminology, because we're going to be dealing with the terminology when we talk about the logical mind, the self-talk and things like that, you can help people come out. Remember, my goal is that not just you guys learn to be more confident, but this is how everyone runs their world. And therefore, you can use the same tools to help them. So as a mom, by the way, if you have young children, as one of you do, you can help them by getting them to step out when they're very upset, to observe it, to see it. Well, imagine for a second you're watching a movie and there you are right there on the movie, and you see that person in that situation. You just start talking about them in third person. That's a shortcut. But you'll notice that people they'll shift. They'll look off in the distance and they will calm down because it's not their problem anymore. So that's a great observation, Isla. Any questions about this piece so far? Because this one's a little complex. This is the second thing that anyone that works with me, I will go through this in a session with. And if those of you who have gone in session, you know that I will bring it back to this all the time. This is my biggest contribution, I think, to the craft is literally what I do with people about how I take them out of themselves, because there's a lot of different ways to do it. By the way, I'll read this later. They've been talking about this forever. Step out, like I said, step out of yourself, walk in their moccasins. They've been telling us the secrets of doing this forever. So this is nothing new, this whole perceptual position. And neurolinguistic programs are talking about it for 30 years. But I have something here from 1964 that also mentions it. If you read any of the old style stuff, they'll talk about step out, observe yourself, be the observer, be the disinterested observer. This is all stuff. So when it comes to confidence, here's the deal. A lot of times when you're not confident, you're seeing it right there. If I ask that person out, there she is saying no. If I ask for that raise, there it is. If I try that new career and I see everyone around me just really not wanting anything to do with it. And if you learn to step out at that moment, if you learn to watch that person, you may find that it's not as daunting a task. And so that's why I had you guys just imagine. I'm going to do another imagine exercise in a minute. Now, Isla's not driving a car. So unless there's any other questions, I'm going to get back to the regular recording.
I had one, Ken.
Yep.
Does it come like naturally after a while? Because I guess you have to make a conscious decision to step in and to step out. To what feels good, we're stepping in. To what feels bad, we step out.
It does for the most part. And this is like anything else. Remember, there's a learning process, and it goes from unconscious incompetence. You didn't know something existed. You didn't know that you didn't know it. That's where most people are on this stuff before I talk to them. Then there's conscious incompetence. Well, now you know it, but it's kind of difficult to figure all that stuff out. Then you practice and you become consciously competent. This is the same for anything. And therefore, now you can do it, but you got to think about it. And that's where you'll be for a while. You'll sit there and say, oh, I feel bad. Oh, wait, I should step out. Let me remind myself. But eventually it becomes unconscious competence. It's mastery. It's just how you walk through the world. So in any given situation, you get used to just unconsciously doing it. But if you come in for a session and you say, hey, I noticed this time I did this, I used to do that, and we take it apart, odds are pretty good I'll find something you did different with your body and your breathing. I'll be able to figure out or help you figure out, oh, did you step out of that for a second? And people will even use the words. Ken, it's weird. I usually get really tense when I do that, but it was like I just kind of like centered myself, and I was just kind of watching myself and saying, that guy can do it. And you won't get that you just did it until I stop you and go, so are you saying that you just breathe, relax your shoulders, and stepped out and observed? And people, oh yeah, I did. Because when it's unconscious, it's almost less, you get less of a bang out of it because you don't notice it. You don't get the, I did it. You just walk through the world that way. And that is the goal for all of this. But that takes practice. And now I'm going to start sending out hypnosis recordings. The first one I'm going to say, well, I'll talk about it on the recording part, but there'll eventually be one where I'm taking you out of your body and doing all that kind of stuff. And then you're going to have the recordings forever. So you can always reiterate it on any problem. We're back. So a couple of caveats, a couple of things to think about when we're talking about perceptual positions. That fly on the wall, by the way, I want you to think about this. Why is it that we can solve our friends' problems, but we can't solve our own? Have you ever been in a wedding party where the two people are very in love? They're very congruent. They very much know this is it forever. And everyone in the wedding party is taking bets on how long this thing lasts till it falls apart. Because everyone outside of the couple can see this is a match made in hell. It's never going to work. But those two people in that moment, they're just seeing each other through their eyes. They're just feeling the feelings, and they just know it's going to last forever. And 6 months to 2 years later, they're divorced. And we all took bets on it. It was so obvious to us. That's why sometimes talking to somebody else, the sounding board, is really important. Even someone who's not trained as a professional, so to speak, because they're going to have a natural third position. They're not as interested. They don't have all the chatter. First position in your mind, there's a lot of talk because the emotions are coming up. There's a lot of moving parts. You're saying things to yourself. When you're observing somebody else, you don't tend to fill in their dialogue. It just isn't that interesting. And here's another thing. Some people have a real hard time if I ask them to step out of themselves when it's about a situation that is very emotional. And some people have even said, it's like, I can step out for a second, but then I'm seeing it through my eyes, but then I'm watching, and I keep going back and forth. It keeps pulling me back in, is what I've heard from more than one person. And what I have to do then is help them move farther away, not just play with the distance and the perceptual part, but literally change the person they're viewing. So for instance, if I'm dealing with someone and he's 6'4" and he's a white male, I might say, okay, you know what? You're going to go ask for the raise. Imagine the same situation, but the person asking for the raise is a little Asian woman. She's 5 feet tall. She's got the same skill set. Job's the same. Raise is the same. All the situation. It's just you're watching her do it. And for some people, that's enough to get them over that logical mind piece that won't shut up and tell them, no, step into it. This is really important. And they're able to do it. I've even had people where I've had to make it cartoon characters. So imagine a penguin cartoon character who's married to that walrus cartoon character, and they think you have the same problem. And there they are at a barbecue, and that walrus says the same thing in front of all the other barnyard animals. And then that penguin, well, she may have a different thing that she could say. What would that be? And it'll be obvious to them. And then I'll bring it back to someone that kind of looks like them. And at that point, they've learned to pull themselves out of it. So because of that, I understand something that most people don't. I understood it for a long time. Depression, as I say, is my gift and my curse. And I understand how the world changes that quick. This is one of the ways the world changes that quick. The next time you're overwhelmed, step out, observe, get all the emotion out. When you step out, there are two things that tend to really make a difference. One is distance. If you imagine yourself as if you're 10 feet away from someone, or you imagine you're 50 feet away from them, you're going to get less emotion usually at 50 feet away. Now, that's for most people. Everyone has their exceptions to every rule. The other thing is if you can drain the color out. And for some of us of a certain generation that can actually remember black and white TV, it seems to be easier. But like one of those old black and white movies, if you drain the color out of something you're imagining, that tends to drain the emotion out. There are other, what you call in neurolinguistic programming, driver submodalities, because I like to let you know I know the big words too. And what that means is different ways that you change the picture, the perception, that changes the impact on you. But those tend to be the ones that are most effective for most people. And remember, this whole thing is about the quick and dirty, how to get it done. It's not really all about theory. I want to help you guys achieve it. With that in mind, you'll be receiving a hypnosis recording that will literally teach you how to step out of your body and observe from all different perspectives. And with that hypnosis recording, you're going to learn how to do this on an unconscious level where it becomes just how you do things. When you have that recording, it's yours forever. And I would suggest from time to time, when you're overwhelmed about something, you listen to that recording and apply what you're experiencing it. So now I'm going to ask you to really think about doing the homework, because that little homework assignment you had at the beginning is something we're going to be building on as we watch this person from a different perspective go through the situations that they said they don't feel comfortable, become the person that they said they want to be. The first recording I'm going to send you, by the way, is a recording where you get to meet the person that you want to be, to understand on a visceral level what it's like to be them. And you'll notice, if you're really paying attention, there is a time I play with your perspective in that one specifically. It's not even the audio that is designed to do that. But you can't help but do these things with people. And again, once you start doing it more consciously, you'll notice it all over the place in how people talk and how they react. Anytime somebody is hyper in the moment, pissed off, angry, hurt, you can guarantee they are seeing it through their own eyes as if they're experiencing it again right now. In fact, they may have rehearsed that situation over and over and over before they got into it. And they may have reiterated that situation thousands of times since they experienced it, each time giving themselves the adrenaline rush, each time getting the heart rate up, each time causing themselves to go into fight or flight, to say some very nasty things about the person they're involved with. Have you ever gone to someone's house angry about something, rehearsed the argument over and over and over on the way there, only to find that there was no argument, there was a misinterpretation. But the whole time you were on your way there, if we checked your blood pressure, if we checked every physical measurement, if we put you on an EKG, if we put you on something that could read your brainwaves, everything would say, this person is in a conflict right now, even one that never existed. So think about that. Next time you are going to go confront someone, you may want to step out first and make sure there's actually a confrontable offense. Once again, the shortcut, perceptual positions. If it feels good, step in your body. The best sexual position is first position. If you want to know how to have a really bad sex life, only step out and observe it. Watch it as if you're watching pornography. Critique what is going on in that scene. What she's doing wrong, what he's doing wrong, how they could do it better. Notice every imperfection and flaw in their bodies, the funny sounds they make, and everything else, the faces. And I can guarantee you will not have as good an experience. So, 2 things you can do with perception. 1, you can change the focus. Are you just looking at the bubble, or are you realizing there's something beyond the bubble? And if I was to say to you, take a moment, close your eyes, and do it right now. Close your eyes and imagine something in your life right now, a bubble, so to speak, where maybe there is an issue. It can be a little issue. It could be something in the future, but it's got to be something that there'll be something beyond, something you haven't, you're either in it or you know it's coming up. And watch that person. Imagine pulling back, imagine putting them on a screen. Watch them go through that bubble, but allow yourself to do something else. Also watch them as they went through their life that led to the bubble. In other words, watch the wins. And every time you see something they did right that built some kind of strength, resiliency, for that moment, you may want to step into yourself. For that moment, you may want to see it through your eyes again. But if you did that long enough, it's one of the things I do with people on hypnotherapy. Then as you came to the bubble, you watch that person go through it. You realize they survived, and you see there's some things that will happen afterwards. Might take it different directions, but they always survive. What you're doing is you're training yourself how to observe yourself, to see strengths, to step into those strengths, and then to see the bubble and see what's beyond it. Again, this isn't always about logic. We're all little kids, and little kids need to be reassured it's going to work out okay. So with that in mind, I'll let yourself know anytime you're in a bubble, it's going to work out okay. We have this wonderful thing. If you live in America today, if you live in most European countries today, if you live in most democracies today, we don't tend to have existential threats. We tend to have mortgage payments, spouses yelling at us, bosses giving us dirty looks, somebody cutting us off in traffic, and we tend to treat them that way as if they're existential. They're not. Last week, I talked about how when I'm in traffic, I use the breathing. Well, there's more to it than that. Because when I'm in traffic, someone cuts me off and I get tense. I breathe myself down, but I also step back from it for a moment. I'm not seeing it through my eyes, feeling the feeling of that person trying to screw me over. I'm just seeing 2 cars. One did that. The one who did that, by the way, has no idea who the other person is. Never met him, never gonna meet him. Therefore, it's not personal. They just moved their car. And when you can do that very quickly in the moment, you find that you don't get as upset. The goal with this, by the way, is that you understand it's never really just one position. It's all 3. It's being able to step into someone in a conversation, but step out and form a boundary. Be strong in who you are. It's being able to step out when 2 people are having an argument and just observe them. Get out of the emotion for a second. Maybe even step into the other person just long enough to get their perspective. But always stepping back into yourself. You always want to step back into you because that's where all the juice is. And as you get more confident, you'll find it feels good to step into yourself more and more often. But feel free, as you're learning to be more confident, to use that fly on the wall technique as a crutch, a splint, a tool. You can lean on it a little more often right now. When those situations are coming up that you have said, these are challenges for me, step out and watch the person. You might be surprised at how capable they really are when they get out of their own way. And we're going to cut right there. I'm going to ask some more questions, and then we'll do the last portion of this. Gallery view. Unmute, 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 unmute. Ask to start video. Ask to start video. I'm getting good at this. Ask to start video. Ask to start video. And where did Chuck go? Jana, somebody got lost in the start video process.
That was me.
There we go. Isla, you got to keep up. There we go.
I don't have control. You took it away.
Perfect. You always have control. So I got a little more into this whole technique. And I wanted to, again, this one's really important, but it's hard to do it in a vacuum. It's hard for me to just do it out in the space. So I want to make sure that you guys are all getting it. All right. And I didn't want to I'll be sending you something that will take you through the process. And that's always better than any questions you can ask. But the quick and dirty, once again, is if it feels good, step in. If not, step out. Think about what you put on your homework. What situation is really, you feel not confident. Whatever brought you to me, there's something that sticks out in your mind. For a lot of you, by the way, it's career stuff. In fact, that's the main thing this go around that most people have come to me. Last go around, there was more about relationships. So every group brings something different. But if you're going to think about career stuff, changing a career, starting a new career, whatever it is, again, if you are seeing it through your eyes, if you're getting those feelings, it's a little dicey. But if I was to have you step way back, literally 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet of the person that is sitting there watching the computer right now, if you were to watch them watch their computer, if you were to even float up like 10 feet, so you're kind of looking down at a 45-degree angle, if you were to hold that perspective with them and you were to follow them backwards in time and see all the skills they've developed, the resiliency, the times they've been challenged and raised to the challenge. You may also notice, if you looked at them, that there are qualities that they have that you don't tend to notice in you, but stepping out of it, it's obvious. They have certain qualities, strengths that they don't give themselves credit for. So part of this, to do it really, play it to the next level, is if you were their best friend, if you literally love that person, like as much as you loved anyone, which again sounds odd to say, but most of us don't do that to ourselves. But if you were to really love that person and know them, know their journey, their struggle, see what they've been through, now watch that person change a career. See what they have to do, because you'll notice there's some things they have to do to prepare for that. They might have to get certain schooling. They might have to get certain certification. But keep watching them and keep telling yourself in your mind, I'm watching them. Keep it on them. But watch them through eyes that are full of positive regard. If you were to advise them about their career choice, if they could do it or not, if you were to literally walk up, put your arm on their shoulder, and you got to tell them, yeah, take this shot, or got to be honest, you just don't have the skills for this, what would you say? Because this is part of not being confident. It's not observing your own skills. It's not looking at yourself and saying, I got this. Because we're in our own body. All we're thinking about is all the things that is wrong with me. And nobody else notices 99% of those things. No one cares. So for instance, if you were in a career where, say, hypothetically speaking, you taught a certain technique of movie making to people, and you left that career because, hypothetically speaking, you had 2 wonderful children, and you were thinking about going back into a career. It's funny how when people are doing that, when I ask them this really key question, I go, what's your strength? This doesn't apply to everyone, but there's certain people here it does. Say, what's your strength? And they'll tell me this. They'll tell me the technical aspect. They'll say this. They'll say that. And I'll say, wait a second. The one thing you didn't say is I'm a dad. I'm a mom. I raised a kid. That's really hard to do. And if you watch that person raise those kids, that kid, whatever, you'll get it. Wow, that's difficult to raise a child. It is a challenge and a half. And therefore, they had to bring certain skills to it. to raise that child. This is what I'm talking about. When you observe someone, if you're talking to your best friend, you point that out to them. Hey man, look at your kids. You did pretty well on that. I think you could probably change this career path. And there's other, you doesn't have to be a parent in order to have these strengths. But I want to point out, we don't see our own strengths because we're in our bodies. And when you step out, you tend to see them. So think for a second, you all got challenges, you all put stuff down. What are some strengths that person, again, you're going to look at them, has that maybe they weren't noticing about themselves? Because I can guarantee, after having done this so long, that if I sat with you, if I had you do this, if we went through this, you would notice some things about that person that they're totally ignoring, that tells you they have a chance of being successful. By the way, this is not a magic wand thing. Sometimes you might literally come to the conclusion they don't have the skill set. In which case, great. What could they do to get the skills? The next question becomes, how do they get whatever they don't have? But I've noticed that more times than not, it really is people notice things, strengths, that they totally have ignored. And so for you guys, this is kind of a contemplative thing too. And any time in your life, and when I have stress, this is the thing. And I'll talk about this, when I'm recording. But this is all rebuilding myself after depression each time. Each time depression hits me, I got to go through all these exercises and get my confidence back. Because when you want to die, you're not really that confident. When you think you're a drain on everyone you love, it's not going to bring up good feelings. When your brain chemistry is going way wiggy and telling you there are saber-toothed tigers everywhere, you develop some bad behaviors. And when I come out of it, one of the things that I'll do first is I'll step out. If I notice I'm starting to go into it, I'll step out. There comes a time when you can't really fight it, but I use all these tools to stay functional, to stay in my best state when I'm most challenged. And stepping out is a big one. Breathing and stepping out are if you learn nothing else from me, breathing and what perceptual position to use are going to be the most important. And again, we're going to be sending you guys some stuff so that you'll have, hypnotically installed, so to speak. You'll be doing it over and over again as many times as you want. So any questions about this last bit of information that I gave you?
You said you're going to be sending a hypno recording.
Mm-hmm. I'll be sending an MP3. Same way
right.
I'll send you the file, the same way I sent the other file.
And it's something I could listen to like daily, or is it something you would recommend? Okay.
I would say that you'll, once you listen, because these are about 30 minutes long, right? They're a little more expensive. The 5-minute thing was just getting you guys used to it. Right. I would say that you can listen to as much as you want, but you'll kind of come naturally to these are keys. These are my own hypnosis things based on this kind of stuff. So it's not anything you're going to be able to get in a store or what most people would take you through hypnosis and do.
Right.
This is specific to these processes. So for instance, the one that teaches you to step out, you use that every day you're having an issue and you want to learn to step out of yourself. Listen to it.
Well, where was that Sunday night?
Exactly. Well, now you'll have it. And by the way, again, I listen to them myself when I need it. So I know they're
probably not going to have that problem again because I know my triggers.
Everyone will have
learning. Well, but I'll have tools now.
You, me, and everybody else. We are imperfect beings, and part of this is learning to accept our imperfections. I call it being unapologetically you. That's my goal for everyone. Unapologetically you.
Good one.
This is me. Learn to love it or fuck off. But that's really what I'm hoping for. Is that you all have that level of self-acceptance where you get it. Like, I am just because I am. This part of the module has been about perception. First part was about body. Next week, we talk about the logical mind. By next week, I would hope that you would listen to the recording you're going to get. It's a hypnotic recording, and anytime you listen to a hypnosis recording, do not listen to it while driving. It's the kind of thing, or I guess operating heavy machinery, or probably if you are chainsawing something. But do not listen to it when you should be paying attention to other things. It is designed for you to close your eyes, for you to get relaxed. For those of you who are afraid of the H word, as I call hypnosis, realize this: anytime you're doing a guided meditation, a visualization, what do they call mindfulness, you're doing forms of hypnosis. They just call it different things. So think of this as a guided visualization if you want to go that route with it. Next week, we'll talk about the logical mind, but we'll also talk about how languaging, using the language that we use, can help you to shift the perceptions. Because what you're going to find is this all works together in harmony and synergy. That's why it's a formula. And learning each of the different pieces of the formula means you'll be able to figure out in your own formula at any given moment. The goal for me is that you can look at it and say, where is the piece missing that I need to make this formula work? My larger goal is that you'll start viewing other people through this formula and start figuring out where is their piece missing. And my largest goal for you would be that you start applying this formula to everything in your life, because it's called Life's Secret Formula. It's your confidence formula for the purpose of this, but it's really how you do anything. And once you start understanding that, you create your own subjective reality, then you start having choices where you didn't think you had them before. So with that in mind, practice the techniques. I would recommend that you still listen to that breathing recording, because once you do it long enough, it becomes automatic. It becomes your response. Stand in your power stances 2 minutes a day. Listen to the confidence quickie. You feel great every time you do, and it's only 4 minutes long. And now, also, start looking at the world in a different way. Here's some extra homework, extra credit, ways to help you play with perception. Next time you're out and about, coffee house, someplace like that where you're sitting, just imagine, what would it look like if I had a camera and I was over there looking back at me, or I was up there looking down at me? What would I look like from that perspective? As you start doing that more and more, it becomes easier for you to step out and be a fly on the wall. You're teaching your mind how to do that automatically. And also remember this, the goal is not to always be dissociated. That's what trauma victims do. They have to learn to step back into their bodies. The goal is to have the flexibility, because if you only have one way of doing something, you're stuck. If you can do the opposite of that, that's great. But really, 99 times out of 100, it's somewhere in between is the sweet spot. It's the ability to do both that gives you the flexibility to fit the situation. And one of the sayings in neurolinguistic programming and cybernetics is the most flexible part of any system controls the system. And that's true for you interacting with other people, but it's also true for you interacting with yourself. So if you have a very rigid confidence formula that's not working for you, and you're trying to apply it again and again and again, by the way, that's what humans do. It's the definition of insanity. What I'm doing doesn't work, so let me just try it harder and harder and harder. I'm banging my head against the wall. Let me keep banging it and banging it and banging it, and at some point, maybe something will change. Or I could take 2 steps to the left, open the door, and walk through. Flexibility is part of confidence. I'll be throwing those nuggets at you every once in a while. Flexibility is key. Part of learning this formula is learning you can be flexible in the moment. You can shift your perceptions as needed. You can focus on the bubble or focus what's beyond it. You can move your body, stand, sit, breathe in a certain way that shifts it out of a state of high alert. You can change the things you say to yourself. And most importantly, you can do all of those things to change the deep emotional mind understandings that you bring to the table. So we'll see you next week. That extra credit assignment is this. In addition to whatever else gets sent to you, which I highly recommend, go through it. It's all designed to work together in harmony and synergy. Every time you're out and about, take a moment, even sitting there right now. Imagine if I was to step out of my own body, if I was to walk across the room, what would that person look like that's sitting there? If I was to walk behind them, what would they look like from behind, from the side, from above, even from below? Because here's another thing about that perspective. When you step out of yourself, you are the cameraman, and you can move that camera different places. And depending on where you move that camera, it will change your perception of the events. Moving it way far away and above is going to get you kind of dispassionate, but there's other ways to play with it. And I'll be sending out some extra credit videos, so to speak, or putting them on the Facebook group that'll talk about this. As with everything else, I'm giving you the basics in these recordings. And then I'll always be adding little tips, little things. So we'll see you next week. As I said, next week's Logical Mind, how you talk to yourself. Do the assignments. They're really going to help you. This is 6 weeks, a bubble in your life. After the bubble is what's really important. It's not about right now. Right now, you're learning something. Training wheels are on. You have unconscious incompetence becoming conscious incompetence. You're learning things and knowing you don't really know how to do them. With practice, they become consciously competent. You can do it, but you got to think about it when you do it. And then eventually they become unconsciously competent. You just do it. It's how you walk through life. So if you want to learn to walk through life with confidence, take advantage of all the tools that you're going to be getting over this 6-week bubble of time that will change the rest of your life. See you next week.